Hello and welcome to Families Made Differently, the podcast designed to share stories from Christians across the UK whose lives and families have been shaped by adoption and fostering. In this episode, I thought we'd share a bit about our story, so I thought I'd interview my husband, Jack. My name is Bex Baker. Could you start, Jack, by introducing yourself?
I'm Jack, I am your husband, and it's my pleasure to be here. So we are previously EP carers, but are now waiting to be adopters. We're in the final stages of the process, and we're just waiting for that all to be finalised.
Yeah, that is where we're at. Do you want to explain what EP carers are before we move on?
Sure, you have the mainstream adoption, which it's the regular route that most people think of when you think of adoption. But you also have EP. Now, EP carers, you start off as a foster carer for a child, but your intention is that you would love to adopt them. So often this means that they are on the younger end of the age group, so it could be from birth or maybe up to a few years, but this is when a child initially goes into foster placement. And initially, in mainstream adoption, a child could go around foster placements a few times and change places and locations and lose that attachment and security before eventually finding an adoption placement for them. The idea with EP is that they go straight to you as foster carers, and then if they're placed for adoption, they will stay with you, which means that they don't have any extra changes or moves, which is just so much better for the child. But it does bring extra risks for you as the potential adopter, because it might not always go to adoption and you have your heart set on adopting this child from the start and you grow to love them. So there is that little bit of risk that it won't go right for you, even if reuniting with birth family is a good outcome. There is that risk that you're going to feel a bit heartbroken.
Great, thank you. Okay, how did you become an adopter?
Did I have much choice?
No.
So I became an adopter through conversations with you. It was never on my radar to adopt. I think I would have said that when I was younger, if I'd had fertility issues or whatever in marriage, then I would have wanted to adopt rather than go through IVF or anything like that. But that's such a long way off when you're thinking about it hypothetically that it never really came up. I always thought I would have birth children, and it was as simple as that. And then I met you, and this will hopefully be the same for other people out there as well that are listening, and potentially husbands in the same situation where the wife brings up, or maybe the husband brings up the idea of adopting. I think the important thing is to really listen to the heart of it and what the other person's saying, and being open to it and discovering and exploring it, which is what we did. We talked about it a lot before we were engaged because it's something that was so important to you. Once we were married, we then started investigating it slowly, just so we knew the facts for when we were ready to start having kids, we could go into it. We spent a lot of time going through, reading different articles. Homes for Good is a fantastic charity with brilliant articles that you can read, but also going to a few information evenings that other charities or networks at Social Care tell you all the information about it, and basically the same, but it gives you the opportunity to ask questions. And so we went through that process, and actually through it we decided that, I came around to the idea of, I think I want to adopt, and that's how we got into it. That's the start of the story.
Okay, and did you feel God was calling you into it?
Did I feel God was calling me into it? I don't think I felt that way to the same level you did.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, he very clearly put it on your heart. God didn't necessarily put it on my heart, but what he did was confirm to me and that it was the right decision and calm some of those fears and gave me peace about some of my questions and uncertainty about it. I think there's an element of God doesn't always put things on your heart. We were just reading the other day about God-given dreams, and I don't think this always is the case for adoption or other things in life, but when you go and explore it, when it is something that is godly, is righteous, then God will encourage you in it, or if it's not the right thing for you, he will deter you from it. And for me, God just confirmed through the process building up to jumping in that this was the right thing to do, that I could do this, that we could do this, and that I shouldn't be afraid of it. I shouldn't be afraid of feeling that I wouldn't love this child as much as I would a birth child, which for me was the biggest hurdle about that question. And God really gave me some peace about it. And as soon as Toyin arrived with us on that first day, I knew I was going to be in love with him.
How has adoption shaped your family, or our family, I should say?
I think it's fair to say 2.5 years total through the whole process, even before Toyin arrived. Almost been the most important thing in our family. It's been a bit all-consuming, where I'm able to reflect a little bit now. It's been huge, but I think what I've really enjoyed is how the wider family have all got on board and jumped in as well. I think we're both really blessed in that we had the conversations, and they did ask why, but as soon as we kind of talked about it being on our hearts to do, I think they got on board, and we were so blessed with that. So it's become such a big part of the family, and I think making that more normal as we go through life is going to happen, and it will just make everything easier and easier.
I've enjoyed the process of asking family members. So are you going to adopt or have birth children? I feel like I'm the only one who has the right to almost ask that question. But...
Do you think you ask friends that more now as well?
Less friends, but definitely family.
I find myself asking that to most random people.
Yeah, like I'm happy to ask it now that I've done it.
So I was on a stag do with Paul a while back, and one of the guys there was engaged. He found out Toyin was with us. He just started asking all these questions. It was so funny. I just found myself so advocating for adoption in his relationship. It's like, you should do it. It's brilliant. It's amazing. And I just think it's not even that. It's other people that I've met for even less time than for a few days. As soon as it comes around to it, I think people have questions and they want to ask, and they're maybe a bit hesitant, but it's always fun being able to jump in and say, hey, no, go for it, do it.
Yeah, and open people's minds to it doesn't have to be one way, because it's always been one way.
Yeah.
Whereas it doesn't have to be. It can be in the choice picks from the beginning.
Yeah, it should be up there in the first choice rather than backup choice.
Oh, absolutely.
For more people. There are so many, and maybe they're listening today, there'd be so many people who don't have adoption as the first choice. That would make the most amazing parents, the most amazing adopters. And it's a shame, because there's a load of children out there that are missing out on potential families, and there's a load of people out there who are missing out on an amazing experience with God of becoming a parent through adoption that is just so special and so unique.
Okay, what's your favourite memory so far in your adoption journey?
How to pick? I mean, there's a few. The day he first arrived.
Pretty special.
It's pretty special.
And terrifying.
Utterly terrifying. I can really picture. We live on the first floor maisonette. It's just the first floor of the house with steps down to our front door. And I remember being at the top of the steps because it's quite narrow. You went down to get Toyin and to bring him up the steps with all the herd of social workers following you. And I just remember you bringing this car seat carrier up the steps coming in, and I was both excited and terrified in equal measure at that point. And we sat down in the living room, and that's when I first got to see his face. My heart at that moment, my gosh. And there was that feeling of just love, but also terror, as I said, because eventually the social workers just left here's a baby. Which is just mad when you think about it and describe it to people. But it's the same level of madness as where you've just given birth to one. Hey, here's a baby, you're now a parent. People, you just don't know what to do you? So I guess it's similar to that, but there's so many amazing memories. I'm trying to pick ones that are more adoption based though, rather than just raising a child, because there's so many amazing kind of child raising memories. But I think every time we got that little bit of good news about it going forwards, and it's been such a roller coaster, but in our situation we're blessed enough that it's going to go to adoption and be completed. That there's so many ups and downs on this roller coaster that the ups really do feel amazing when they happen, because some of the downs can be really low. Yeah, you really celebrate and treasure the little things in the process.
And how has God been speaking to you through this journey?
It's been a long journey, and I think one of the frustrating things about it isn't the fact that it has been long. It will be as long as it will be. It's that it's longer than we were told it was going to be. Patience is exactly what's needed. We've had other things going on in life that we've had to put on hold because of this adoption taking so long. And I don't resent that. Like, toiling's more important than any of the other bits that we've got. They've all been put on hold. And I think patience for that, and for God's timing and understanding that it's okay to not understand his timing. That I'm not clued in. I don't have an eternal perspective. He does. My understanding of the world and timing is so limited that I want it now. I want it as quickly as possible, because surely quicker is better. But this is in his timing. It will work out perfectly because of that. But I think patience for the social workers too. I think that's a big one for all the different people involved. Is so tempting because it's so much of it's out of your hands. You do your little bit of work and you do it as quickly as you can, then it goes off, and then you're just waiting, and you're waiting for other people to do their job so you can progress in something so important in your life. God's been teaching me patience on that front as well. I would say I'm a pretty patient person anyway, but this has really tested me. Patience with the professionals you're going to be working with. They are working hard, they are overworked, they are human and will make mistakes, and I think it's the system that's broken, not the people in it. So having grace with the people and not blaming them for the fact that the system they work in is broken, I think it's really useful for them. But I think that's something that God's been challenging me on and trying to grow in me, and that understanding about not blaming a person, but understanding that they're part of a system that's not working. And that's not their fault.
And also the children are so worth it despite the system as well. I think that's the thing to know. Okay, have you experienced God's blessing in this journey?
Yeah, I mean, fatherhood is a blessing in itself. And becoming a parent is incredible. So much more than I could ever have imagined. I think I've experienced a blessing on top of that in my understanding about our status as adopted children of God. Like, that's been such a blessing. Feeling so much more secure in that identity. It's just kind of taken that to a whole new level where I fully get it now. In the same way that Toyin is going to be our adopted son. He is fully my son. Fully. There's no part of that he is not my son. He's fully my son. I think there's always an element that until you go through that, I don't think you can appreciate how full a feeling that is. In your head, there's always a little bit, as there was in mine initially, there's always that little bit of doubt and questions about how full that feeling of fathership and sonship be, of family. Upon realising how full it is, it's made me realise actually how God feels about me on a whole new level, that I'm an adopted son of God through Christ, and there is no part of him, because I'm adopted in, that makes him think of me of any less than a full son. And that's just such an amazing identity.
Thank you. I know you've kind of touched on this already, but what advice would you give someone starting a journey into adoption?
Number one, set aside a few years. It's not going to interrupt anything else that you might do. I'd say anyone thinking about adoption, talk about it and explore. And hopefully, I guess people are listening to this and are doing exactly that. They're listening and talk about it with other people. If you're a single adopter, 100% talk about it with other people that are really close to you. If you're a couple, talk about it with each other a lot, almost too much. Really overthink this. Search for all the resources out there that you can get. And I guess that's one of the reasons why you want to do this podcast, is that you found out that there were no British Christian adoption podcasts. And so hopefully this will help fill that void about this British system as opposed to the American one, where most of the Christian adoption podcasts are from. So yeah, find out as much as you can. Write down your questions. Make them specific and honest, because you can ask those questions. You can ask those questions to the social worker you meet on your training days or the introduction evenings. You could call someone up and just ask them the questions. Really take time to think through what your questions are, and things like Home for Good are a fantastic resource to find answers to most of your questions, because your questions will not be completely original. Other people have thought exactly the same questions as you have. Your circumstances will probably be unique, but your questions about it will not be. Don't be afraid, and if you know people who are adopters, take them out for breakfast. If anyone listens to this and wants to get in touch and take me out for breakfast, I will happily tell you anything about adoption if you're feeding me a full English.
Yeah, and talk to experienced people. Sometimes people who don't know anything about adoption are really unhelpful.
Yeah.
It sounds harsh, but sometimes it's just they say the wrong thing.
Make sure you're specifically paying a lot of attention to people who've gone fully through the system. My advice now would be much better than my advice halfway through, because when you're in it, you are so in the you're in the waves. You can't see anything but the wave that's just gone and the one that's about to smack you in the face. So you can't give any advice outside of that, and it can come across as really daunting. It's useful advice. It's good to get their experience. I wouldn't have been a good person to get advice from at that point. I think that's just a fair assessment for everyone at that stage.
But you need friends who are at the same stage when you're actually doing it. So like, yeah, for advice in advance, you need the big picture. But when you're like in it, you need the people that are in it around you as well. So you can kind of be like, oh, how's your experience going? Or what are you finding tough at the moment?
Yeah, that's so true. So true. You do need both, and having those perspectives. I guess because what it is, you want to ask the advice for people who've been through it all, but you want the support for people who are in it right now with you and can completely empathise with you, with how you're feeling.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that's all my questions. So is there anything you'd like to add?
I think more people should have adoption as their first choice. And as a man who, my biggest fear was, am I going to love this child as much as if it was a birth child? Or my original language would have been, will I love this adopted child as much as one of my own? Yes. Like, the answer is just so yes. And actually, he may be adopted, but Toyan is my own child. He is my own. So there is no such thing as your own child. They are adopted in birth. They are both your own child. I can't express that enough really about how true that is. It was the biggest hurdle for me to get my head around, my biggest worry. And I think even while we're in the foster stage, there were moments where I was concerned about that. But as he's grown older and got his character and those little steps that he goes through growing up, yeah, he is my son, and I would encourage anyone else that's got that same question just to know that they will feel like your child too.
Well, thank you for joining us, Jack, on Families Made Differently, and we will see you all next time. This is Bex Baker. This was Families Made Differently, the podcast designed to share stories from Christians across the UK whose lives and families have been shaped by fostering and adoption. Please follow Families Made Differently on Instagram and make sure you have all your notifications turned on so that you're notified about the next podcast.